Ms. Adams, a strict elementary school teacher, humiliates a disabled black boy named Marky, shattering his confidence in front of the entire class. But just 9 minutes later, the tables turn. And she's the one crying for mercy as the consequences of her actions come crashing down. Can she undo the damage she caused, or has her cruel behavior sealed her fate for good? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Ms. Adams stood at the front of her 6th grade classroom, her steely gaze sweeping over the rows of desks. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. She tapped her foot impatiently, waiting for the last stragglers to take their seats. "Quiet down, class," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter. "We have a lot to cover today, and I won't have any disruptions." As the students scrambled to sit up straight and pull out their textbooks, Ms. Adams couldn't help but feel a twinge of frustration. After 20 years of teaching, she found herself increasingly irritated by the daily chaos of managing a classroom full of preteens. Her eyes landed on Marky, the black boy in the wheelchair at the back of the room. She felt her jaw clench involuntarily. Marky always seemed to need extra time, extra explanations, extra everything. It was exhausting, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding the entire class back. "Today we'll be starting a new unit on fractions," Ms. Adams announced, turning to write on the blackboard. As she scribbled equations, her mind wandered to the stack of ungraded papers on her desk. She used to love teaching, finding joy in helping young minds grow. But now, it felt like a never-ending cycle of lesson plans, discipline issues, and accommodations for students who just couldn't keep up. She turned back to face the class, her eyes narrowing as she noticed Marky fumbling with his textbook. "Marky," she said, her voice tinged with impatience, "we don't have all day. Please try to keep up with the rest of the class." A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others cast sympathetic glances toward Marky. Ms. Adams ignored the tension in the room, pushing forward with her lesson. She told herself it was for the greater good. She couldn't let one student slow down the progress of 20 others. As she launched into her explanation of numerators and denominators, Ms. Adams felt a familiar sense of resentment bubbling up inside her. She remembered a time when she would have gone out of her way to help a struggling student, but those days were long gone. Now she just wanted to get through each day with as little hassle as possible. "Any questions?" she asked, her tone making it clear she didn't really want any. When no hands went up, she nodded curtly. "Good. Now, open your workbooks to page 37 and complete exercises 1 through 10. You have 15 minutes. As the students bent over their desks, Ms. Adams sat down heavily in her chair. She glanced at Marky again, watching as he struggled to maneuver his wheelchair closer to his desk. For a moment, she felt a flicker of guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had a job to do, and she couldn't let herself get bogged down by every student with special needs. Still, as she began grading papers, Ms. Adams couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She had become the kind of teacher she used to despise, cold, unforgiving, and blind to the individual needs of her students. But what else could she do? The system was broken, and she was just trying to survive in it. As the class filed out for recess, Marky carefully maneuvered his wheelchair through the narrow aisle between desks. His classmates patiently waited, offering encouraging smiles as he made his way to the door. Despite the daily challenges he faced, Marky's kind heart and quiet determination had earned him many friends. "Come on, Marky," his friend Jake called from the hallway. "We're gonna play basketball today." Marky's face lit up with excitement. "I'm coming," he replied, his voice filled with enthusiasm. As he wheeled himself out of the classroom, Ms. Adams watched with a frown. She sighed heavily, gathering her papers for the next lesson. The sight of Marky's wheelchair always brought a twinge of frustration to her already stressed mind. Out on the playground, Marky joined his friends near the basketball court. They had developed a system where Marky could participate by being the designated passer, using his strong arms to throw the ball to his teammates. "All right, Marky," cheered Mia as he made a perfect pass to her. "Nice throw." Marky beamed with pride, feeling like a valuable part of the team. For a moment, he forgot about the challenges he faced every day and just enjoyed being a kid playing with his friends. But their game was cut short when Ms. Adams's sharp voice rang out across the playground. "Time's up! Everyone back to class!" As the students began to file back inside, Marky struggled to keep up. The uneven ground of the playground made it difficult for his wheelchair to move quickly. Ms. Adams stood at the door, tapping her foot impatiently. "Hurry up, Marky," she called out, her voice tinged with irritation. "We can't delay the whole class for you." Marky's cheeks burned with embarrassment as he pushed himself harder, his arms straining against the wheels of his chair. His classmates slowed their pace, wanting to walk alongside him, but Ms. Adams urged them inside. "The rest of you, get to your seats," she said firmly. "We have a lot to cover before the end of the day." As Marky finally reached the classroom door, out of breath and with sweat beading on his forehead, Ms. Adams barely concealed her frustration. She held the door open with one hand, her other clutching a stack of worksheets. "You need to find a way to keep up, Marky," she said, her voice low and stern. "Your classmates can't always wait for you." Marky nodded silently, his earlier joy from the playground fading away. He wheeled himself to his desk, feeling the weight of Ms. Adams's disapproving gaze on his back. As the lesson began, Marky tried his best to focus, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden. He noticed Ms. Adams's eyes flickering to his wheelchair more than once, her mouth set in a tight line of displeasure. The following day, the class gathered in the gymnasium for their PE lesson. Ms. Adams stood at the front, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the students as they lined up. When Marky wheeled himself in, she pursed her lips, her frustration already visible. "All right, class," Ms. Adams announced, her voice sharp. "Today we're doing an obstacle course. I expect everyone to give their best effort." The students began to move through the course, climbing over low walls, crawling under nets, and weaving between cones. Marky watched anxiously, knowing he couldn't participate in most of these activities. Ms. Adams approached him, her face stern. "Marky, you can do the parts you're able to. Use your arms to pull yourself along the mat for the crawling section." Marky nodded, determined to try his best. He maneuvered his wheelchair to the starting point and began to make his way through the course. His classmates cheered him on, but Ms. Adams's impatience grew with each passing moment. As Marky struggled to pull himself along the mat, his arms trembling with effort, Ms. Adams's frustration boiled over. "Come on, Marky," she snapped. "You're holding up the entire class." Marky's face flushed with embarrassment. He tried to move faster, but his arms were already tired. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed himself harder. Ms. Adams stood over him, her shadow looming. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you can't keep up, maybe you shouldn't be in this class at all." The gym fell silent. Marky's classmates exchanged uncomfortable glances, shocked by their teacher's cruel words. Marky stopped moving, his head bowed as he fought back tears. Ms. Adams wasn't finished. She gestured to the rest of the class, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look at your classmates, Marky. They're able to participate properly. Why can't you do the same?" Marky's shoulders began to shake as he tried desperately to hold back his sobs. He wanted nothing more than to disappear, to escape the harsh words and judging eyes. His classmates shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others glaring at Ms. Adams. But no one spoke up. The silence in the gym was deafening, broken only by Marky's muffled sniffles. Ms. Adams stood there, her arms crossed, seemingly unaware of the impact her words had on Marky and the rest of the class. The once lively PE lesson had turned into a painful display of cruelty, leaving everyone feeling helpless and ashamed. As the tension in the gymnasium reached its peak, a figure stood silently in the shadows near the entrance. Mrs. Harris, a parent volunteer who had been helping out in the school library, had come to deliver a message to Ms. Adams. Instead, she found herself frozen in place, witnessing a scene that made her blood run cold. Mrs. Harris watched in horror as Ms. Adams berated Marky, her harsh words echoing through the silent gym. The woman's hands trembled as she saw the young boy's shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. A teacher, someone entrusted with nurturing young minds, crushing a child's spirit so callously. Her heart ached for Marky and anger bubbled up inside her. Mrs. Harris knew she couldn't stand by and let this continue. With a determined set to her jaw, she quietly slipped out of the gymnasium, her mind made up. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she strode purposefully towards the administrative offices. Mrs. Harris's face was flushed with a mix of anger and concern, her eyes bright with unshed tears of frustration. As she approached the principal's office, Mrs. Harris took a deep breath to steady herself. She knocked firmly on the door, her resolve strengthening with each passing second. She knew what she had to do. She had to be Marky's voice, to stand up for him when no one else would. "Come in," called a voice from inside the office. Mrs. Harris opened the door, her expression grave. "Principal Wilson," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about Ms. Adams and a student named Marky. What I've just witnessed in the gymnasium is absolutely unacceptable." Back in the classroom, a heavy silence hung in the air. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the students' faces. Marky sat at his desk, his head bowed low, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the smooth surface. He couldn't bring himself to look up, afraid of meeting the eyes of his classmates. The shame from the PE incident clung to him like a second skin. Marky's cheeks burned as he remembered Ms. Adams's cruel words, each one etched into his memory. He wished he could disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish from sight. Around him, his classmates fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats. They snuck glances at Marky, their eyes filled with a mix of pity and unease. Amy, Marky's friend, sat a few desks away, her heart aching for him. She wanted to reach out, to offer some words of comfort, but fear held her back. Ms. Adams's stern presence loomed large in the room, and Amy, like the others, was too scared to speak up. The next morning, at the front of the classroom, Ms. Adams carried on with her lesson as if nothing had happened. Her voice droned on about fractions and decimals, but her eyes kept darting to Marky's hunched form. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face each time she looked at him, as if his very presence was a disruption to her carefully planned lesson. "Marky," Ms. Adams called out suddenly, her voice sharp, "please solve this problem." Marky's head snapped up, his eyes wide with fear. The classroom fell even quieter, the tension palpable as everyone held their breath. Ms. Adams tapped her foot impatiently. "We don't have all day, Marky. Your disability doesn't exempt you from participating in class." Her words cut through the air like a knife, causing several students to wince. Amy bit her lip, her hands clenched into fists under her desk. She wanted to stand up for her friend, to tell Ms. Adams how unfair she was being, but the words stuck in her throat. "Try to be quicker next time," she muttered, just loud enough for Marky to hear. "We can't always wait for you to catch up." Marky's face crumpled at her words, but he fought back the tears threatening to spill. He reached for the chalk, determined to solve the problem, and returned to the safety of his desk as quickly as possible. Minutes later, the sharp knock on the classroom door cut through Ms. Adams's lesson like a knife. All eyes turned to see Mr. Wilson, the principal, standing in the doorway. His face was a mask of seriousness, his usual warm smile nowhere to be seen. "Ms. Adams," he said, his voice firm, "I need to see you in my office immediately." A ripple of whispers spread through the classroom. Ms. Adams's eyebrows furrowed in annoyance. She glanced at the clock, then back at Mr. Wilson. "Can't this wait?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I'm in the middle of an important lesson." Mr. Wilson shook his head. "I'm afraid not. It's urgent." With a huff, Ms. Adams put down her chalk and turned to the class. "Continue working on these problems. I'll be back shortly." As she followed Mr. Wilson out of the room, Ms. Adams's mind raced. What could be so important? She'd been teaching for decades. Surely this was just another routine check on her methods. The thought of it being anything more serious never crossed her mind. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than usual. The hallways were quiet, their footsteps echoing off the lockers. Mr. Wilson didn't say a word, which only fueled Ms. Adams' growing irritation. When they reached the office, Mr. Wilson held the door open for her. As Ms. Adams stepped inside, she was surprised to see Mrs. Harris, the teacher volunteer, sitting in one of the chairs. The woman's face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Please have a seat, Ms. Adams," Mr. Wilson said, gesturing to the empty chair. Ms. Adams sat down, her back straight, her face a picture of impatience. "What's this about?" she asked, looking between Mr. Wilson and Mrs. Harris. Mr. Wilson settled behind his desk, his expression grave. "Ms. Adams, we've received a very serious complaint about your behavior towards one of your students, Marky." The color drained from Ms. Adams's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but Mr. Wilson held up a hand. Mrs. Harris witnessed an incident during your PE class, he continued. She reported that you humiliated and mocked Marky because of his disability. Ms. Adams' heart began to race. She hadn't expected this. She looked at Mrs. Harris, who met her gaze with a mixture of disappointment and anger. I was just trying to motivate him, Ms. Adams stammered, her usual confidence faltering. Mr. Wilson leaned forward, his voice low and serious. Ms. Adams, what Mrs. Harris described goes far beyond motivation. It's discrimination, and it's unacceptable in our school. The gravity of the situation began to sink in. Miss Adams felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. This wasn't a route in a check. This was serious, and she was in trouble. Mr. Wilson's stern gaze bore into Miss Adams as he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Ms. Adams, he began, his voice low and serious. What Mrs. Harris witnessed in your PE class is completely unacceptable. Mocking a student, especially one with a disability, goes against everything we stand for as educators. Ms. Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her usual confidence crumbling. She glanced at Mrs. Harris, who sat silently, her eyes filled with disappointment. I wasn't mocking him, Ms. Adams stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just trying to push Marky to do better. He needs to learn that the world won't always accommodate him. Mr. Wilson's frown deepened. That's not your decision to make, Ms. Adams. Our job is to support and encourage all students, regardless of their abilities or limitations. Ms. Adams felt a surge of frustration. She straightened her back, finding her voice again. But what about the other students? Marky's disability slows down the entire class. It's not fair to them. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd made a mistake. Mr. Wilson's eyes flashed with anger, and Mrs. Harris gasped audibly. Not fair? Mr. Wilson repeated, his voice rising slightly. What's not fair is singling out a student and humiliating him in front of his peers. What's not fair is a teacher, someone who should be nurturing and supportive, making a child feel ashamed of something he can't control. Ms. Adams felt her cheeks burn with shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but Mr. Wilson held up his hand, silencing her. Your job, Ms. Adams, is to teach and support all students, not just the ones you deem worthy of your time and effort. Marky deserves the same respect and opportunities as every other child in this school. The weight of Mr. Wilson's words hit Miss Adams like a ton of bricks. For the first time, she began to see her actions through a different lens. The image of Marky's face, hurt and embarrassed, flashed through her mind, and a knot formed in her stomach. As Ms. Adams sat in stunned silence, Mr. Wilson cleared his throat, his expression grave. There's more, Ms. Adams. We've arranged an emergency meeting with Marky's mother, Grace Valera. Ms. Adams felt the blood drain from her face. Grace Valera was not just any parent. She was a formidable human rights advocate known throughout the community. More importantly, she was one of the school's biggest donors. Mrs. Valera? Ms. Adams whispered, her voice trembling. But when? She'll be here in an hour, Mr. Wilson replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. I suggest you use this time to reflect on your actions and prepare yourself. Ms. Adams nodded weakly, her mind racing. She knew Grace Valera's reputation, a woman who fought tirelessly for equality and justice. And now she would be face to face with her, having to explain why she had mistreated her son. As she left Mr. Wilson's office, Ms. Adams felt as if the walls were closing in on her. The gravity of the situation hit her full force. This wasn't just about a reprimand or a slap on the wrist. Her entire career could be on the line. She made her way to the teacher's lounge, desperate for a moment of solitude. Sinking into a chair, she buried her face in her hands. How had it come to this? She had always prided herself on being a good teacher, strict but fair. When had she crossed the line from maintaining discipline to outright cruelty? The image of Marky's face, hurt and humiliated, flashed through her mind again. This time, instead of irritation, she felt a pang of guilt. She had made a child feel ashamed of something he couldn't control. What kind of teacher did that make her? As the minutes ticked by, Ms. Adams's anxiety grew. She knew Grace Valera held significant influence in the school's operations. A word from her could mean the end of Ms. Adams's teaching career. The thought made her stomach churn. She tried to gather her thoughts to come up with some explanation for her behavior, but every justification she thought of sounded hollow and selfish in her own ears. How could she possibly defend what she had done? With trembling hands, Ms. Adams poured herself a glass of water, trying to calm her nerves. She had an hour to prepare, but she felt woefully unprepared for what was to come. The meeting with Grace Valera loomed before her like an insurmountable obstacle, one that could determine the course of her future. That afternoon, Ms. Adams took a deep breath and pushed open the door to the meeting room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stepped inside. The room felt smaller than she remembered, the air thick with tension. Seated at the table was Grace Valera, Marky's mother. Ms. Adams had seen her before at school events but didn't know that she was the mother of Marky. Grace's presence filled the room with a quiet strength that made Ms. Adams feel even more uneasy. Grace looked up as Ms. Adams entered, her dark eyes calm but filled with concern. She nodded slightly, gesturing for Ms. Adams to take a seat across from her. "Ms. Adams," Grace said, her voice soft but firm, "thank you for meeting with me on such short notice." Ms. Adams managed a weak smile as she sat down. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clasped them tightly in her lap to hide it. "Of course, Mrs. Valera," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Grace took a moment before speaking again, her gaze never leaving Ms. Adams. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened with my son Marky during your PE class." Ms. Adams felt her throat tighten. She opened her mouth to speak, but Grace held up a hand, silencing her gently. "Before we discuss the specifics," Grace continued, "I'd like to share something with you. As an educator, I'm sure you understand the importance of compassion in teaching, especially when it comes to children with disabilities." Ms. Adams nodded stiffly, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. Grace leaned forward slightly, her voice warm but serious. "Every child, regardless of their abilities or challenges, deserves to feel valued and respected in the classroom. It's not just about teaching subjects. It's about nurturing young minds and hearts." As Grace spoke, Ms. Adams felt a mix of shame and fear wash over her. She knew Grace was right, but the words also reminded her of how far she had strayed from these ideals. "I understand that teaching can be challenging," Grace continued, "but it's in those challenging moments that our compassion matters most. When we show understanding to those who struggle, we teach all our students the value of empathy and inclusivity." Ms. Adams finally looked up, meeting Grace's eyes. She was surprised to see not anger, but a deep sadness and concern in the other woman's gaze. "Mrs. Valera," Ms. Adams began, her voice shaky, I don't know what to say. I never meant to." Grace nodded, encouraging her to continue. But Ms. Adams found herself at a loss for words. How could she explain her actions? How could she justify treating a child so cruelly? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and emotions. Ms. Adams felt her anxiety growing with each passing second, fearing the worst was yet to come. Grace took a deep breath, her eyes softening as she thought of her son. "Ms. Adams, I'd like to tell you a bit more about Marky," she said gently. "He's so much more than the boy you see struggling in PE class." Ms. Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat but nodded, forcing herself to meet Grace's gaze. "Marky has faced challenges since the day he was born," Grace continued, "but he's never let his disability define him. Every day he wakes up with a smile, ready to face whatever comes his way." As Grace spoke, her voice filled with pride and love. Last year, Marky's class went on a field trip to the Science Museum. The bus wasn't wheelchair accessible, so we had to drive separately. When we arrived, Marky saw his classmates already inside. Do you know what he said to me? Ms. Adams shook her head, her curiosity piqued despite her unease. He said, "Mom, I'm just glad I get to go at all. Some kids never get to see cool stuff like this." Grace's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's the kind of person Marky is. He finds joy in what he can do, not sorrow in what he can't. Ms. Adams felt a lump forming in her throat. She had never considered Marky's perspective before. Grace leaned forward, her voice earnest. "Ms. Adams, Marky's disability is just one part of who he is. It doesn't define his worth or his potential. As educators, it's our job to see beyond physical limitations and nurture the unique gifts each child possesses." Ms. Adams nodded slowly, her mind racing. She thought of all the times she had dismissed Marky, seeing only his wheelchair and not the bright, resilient boy sitting in it. "Did you know Marky loves to draw?" Grace asked. "He spends hours sketching animals and landscapes. His art teacher says he has real talent." Ms. Adams blinked in surprise. She had no idea Marky was artistic. "And he's always the first to offer help to his classmates," Grace continued. "Last month, when his friend Amy was struggling with math, Marky stayed in during recess to tutor her." As Grace shared these stories, Ms. Adams felt a growing sense of shame. She had judged Marky solely on what he couldn't do in PE, ignoring all the wonderful things he could do. "Our job as educators," Grace said softly, "is to see the potential in every child, to nurture their strengths and support them through their challenges. Every student, regardless of their abilities or limitations, deserves that chance to grow and thrive." Ms. Adams nodded, her earlier defensiveness giving way to a mix of guilt and realization. She knew Grace was right, but a small part of her still wanted to justify her actions. She had been teaching for so long, surely she knew what was best for her class. But as she looked into Grace's eyes full of love for her son and hope for his future, Ms. Adams felt her excuses crumbling away. Ms. Adams took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mrs. Valera, I want you to know that I never meant to harm Marky," she began, her voice shaky. "I was just trying to encourage him to participate more fully in the class activities." Grace's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained silent, allowing Ms. Adams to continue. "I admit, I was frustrated," Ms. Adams confessed, her words tumbling out faster now. "I felt like I wasn't reaching him, and I thought if I pushed him harder, he might—" She trailed off, realizing how hollow her excuses sounded. Grace leaned forward, her voice firm but not unkind. "Ms. Adams, I understand you may have had good intentions, but no child should ever be humiliated for something beyond their control. Marky's disability isn't a choice he made, it's a part of who he is." Ms. Adams felt her face flush with shame. Grace's words cut deep, piercing through the protective shell she had built around herself over the years. "Can you imagine how Marky felt in that moment?" Grace continued, her eyes never leaving Ms. Adams. "To be singled out, mocked for something he can't change? To have his teacher, someone he should be able to trust, make him feel less than his classmates?" Ms. Adams's throat tightened. She thought back to the PE class, remembering the hurt in Marky's eyes, the way he had tried to hide his tears. For the first time, she truly saw the impact of her actions. I didn't think—" Ms. Adams stammered, her earlier defenses crumbling. "That's just it, Ms. Adams," Grace said gently. "You didn't think about Marky as a person. You saw his disability as an inconvenience, not as a part of a child who deserves respect and understanding." As Grace's words sank in, Ms. Adams felt a wave of realization wash over her. She had been so focused on her own frustrations, on maintaining control of her classroom, that she had lost sight of what truly mattered, the well-being of her students. "You're right," Ms. Adams whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was wrong, so terribly wrong." Grace's expression softened as she watched Ms. Adams's realization sink in. Instead of the anger or demand for dismissal that Ms. Adams had expected, Grace surprised her with an unexpected offer. "Ms. Adams," Grace began, her voice calm and measured, "I believe that people can change, but only if they're willing to open their hearts and minds." She paused, making sure she had the teacher's full attention. "Instead of calling for your dismissal, I have a different proposal." Ms. Adams looked up, her eyes wide with confusion and a glimmer of hope. "I'd like you to volunteer at the local Center for Children with Disabilities," Grace continued. "It's an opportunity for you to gain a better understanding of the daily challenges these children face." Ms. Adams's mouth fell open slightly, caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events. She had been bracing herself for the worst, but here was Grace Valera, offering her a chance at redemption. "Mrs. Valera, I don't know what to say," Ms. Adams stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Grace leaned forward, her eyes locked with Ms. Adams. "I believe you can change, Ms. Adams, but to do that, you need to see the world through Marky's eyes, through the eyes of all the children who face challenges every day." Ms. Adams swallowed hard, her mind racing. The thought of volunteering at the center filled her with uncertainty and a touch of fear. She had spent so long distancing herself from students like Marky, and now she was being asked to immerse herself in their world. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," Ms. Adams said hesitantly. Grace's voice was firm but kind. "That's exactly why you need to do it. This isn't just about Marky anymore. It's about becoming the teacher you once aspired to be." After a long moment of internal struggle, Ms. Adams nodded slowly. "All right," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I'll do it." Grace smiled, a look of approval in her eyes. "Thank you, Ms. Adams. I believe this experience will change you in ways you can't imagine." As Ms. Adams left the meeting room, she felt a mix of emotions swirling within her. Relief at being given a second chance, fear of the unknown challenges ahead, and a small spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. She wasn't sure what this experience would entail, but she knew it was a turning point in her life and career. The next morning, Ms. Adams stood nervously in front of the Disability Center. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, the weight of her past mistakes heavy on her shoulders. A cheerful receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "You must be Ms. Adams. We've been expecting you. I'm Alona." Ms. Adams nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yes, that's me." Alona led her down a brightly colored hallway, chattering about the center's programs. Ms. Adams only half listened, her mind racing with uncertainty. They entered a large room filled with children of various ages, all with different disabilities. Some were in wheelchairs like Marky, others used crutches or walkers, and a few had visible cognitive impairments. "Everyone," Alona called out, "this is Ms. Adams. She'll be volunteering with us for a while." A chorus of hellos rang out, and Ms. Adams felt her cheeks flush. She wasn't used to such open warmth, especially from children. As she observed the room, Ms. Adams felt a growing sense of unease. A young girl with cerebral palsy struggled to pick up a crayon, her face scrunched in concentration. Instead of giving up, the girl kept trying, a determined smile on her face. Nearby, a boy in a wheelchair maneuvered himself expertly around obstacles to join a group playing a board game. His friends made room for him without a second thought, treating him no differently than anyone else. Ms. Adams watched as the children went about their activities, each facing their own challenges with a spirit she had never truly appreciated before. She saw their determination, their resilience, and most surprisingly, their joy. A small boy with Down syndrome approached her, holding out a colorful drawing. "For you," he said, beaming up at her. Ms. Adams took the paper with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the morning wore on, Ms. Adams found herself helping with various activities. She assisted a girl with her physiotherapy exercises, read a story to a group of attentive listeners, and even joined in a modified game of basketball. With each interaction, she felt her preconceptions crumbling. These children, whom she had once viewed as burdens, were showing her a strength of character that left her in awe. By lunchtime, Ms. Adams sat in a quiet corner, overwhelmed by what she had experienced. She watched the children laughing, playing, and supporting each other, and felt a deep sense of shame for her past behavior. For the first time, she truly began to understand how limited her view of disability had been. She had seen only the challenges, never the incredible spirit and resilience behind them. As she observed these remarkable children navigating their daily lives with grace and determination, Ms. Adams realized she had so much to learn. As the afternoon activities began, Alona approached Ms. Adams with a gentle smile. "Ms. Adams, I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Malik," she said, gesturing to a young boy in a wheelchair nearby. Malik looked up at Ms. Adams with bright, curious eyes. His legs, much like Marky's, were thin and motionless beneath a colorful blanket. Despite this, his face radiated warmth and energy. "Hi, Ms. Adams," Malik chirped, extending his hand. "Want to see my cool tricks?" Ms. Adams hesitated for a moment before taking his small hand in hers. "Sure, Malik. What kind of tricks?" Without warning, Malik spun his wheelchair in a tight circle, grinning from ear to ear. "Ta-da! I call that one the whirlwind." Ms. Adams couldn't help but chuckle, surprised by the boy's enthusiasm. As she spent more time with Malik, she began to see glimpses of Marky in him. The same determination, the same desire to be seen as more than just a disability. Malik showed Ms. Adams how he navigated obstacles in his wheelchair, how he adapted games to suit his abilities, and even how he helped younger children with their activities. His energy seemed boundless, his spirit unbreakable. As they worked on a puzzle together, Malik shared stories about his life outside the center, his family, his school, his dreams. Ms. Adams listened intently, her heart growing heavier with each word. "Sometimes it's hard," Malik admitted, his voice softer now. "When other kids stare or when I can't do everything they can. But my mom says I'm special, that I can do anything if I try hard enough." Ms. Adams felt a lump form in her throat. She thought of Marky, of how she had dismissed his efforts and mocked his struggles. The shame she felt was overwhelming. Throughout the afternoon, Ms. Adams observed Malik's interactions with other children and staff. She saw how he faced each challenge with determination, how he never let his limitations define him. It was a stark contrast to how she had perceived Marky in her classroom. As the day drew to a close, Ms. Adams found herself sitting quietly, watching Malik laugh with his friends. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: admiration for Malik's resilience, shame for her past actions, and a growing understanding of the daily struggles these children faced. She realized that behind every wheelchair, every pair of crutches, every visible difference, there was a child full of dreams, hopes, and determination. A child who deserved patience, understanding, and respect. Everything she had failed to give Marky. The weight of her realization was almost too much to bear. Ms. Adams felt tears prick at her eyes as she finally began to understand the depth of her mistakes and the incredible strength of the children she had so callously dismissed. As the days passed, Ms. Adams found herself looking forward to her time at the center. The children's laughter and determination touched her heart in ways she never expected. She watched as they tackled challenges head-on, their spirits unbroken by the obstacles they faced. One afternoon, Ms. Adams sat with a group of children during art time. She helped a little girl named Lily, who had limited use of her hands, hold a paintbrush. Lily's face lit up with joy as she created colorful swirls on her paper. "Look, Ms. Adams," Lily exclaimed. "I made a rainbow." Ms. Adams felt a warmth spread through her chest. "It's beautiful, Lily," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine admiration. As she looked around the room, Ms. Adams saw children helping each other, adapting tools to suit their needs, and celebrating each other's achievements. She thought back to her classroom, to Marky, and felt a pang of regret for the times she had failed to see his efforts. During a quiet moment, Ms. Adams overheard two boys talking. One of them, Jake, was telling his friend about a tough day at school. "The other kids laughed when I couldn't climb the rope in gym class," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. His friend, Tommy, patted Jake's shoulder. "Hey, remember what Ms. Alona always says? We're all different, but we're all awesome in our own way." Ms. Adams felt her eyes well up with tears. She thought of the harsh words she had spoken to Marky, how she had made him feel different and less than his classmates. The realization of the pain she must have caused him hit her like a tidal wave. As the weeks went by, Ms. Adams found herself opening up to the children, listening to their stories, and sharing in their triumphs. She learned about their dreams, their fears, and their incredible resilience. Each day she felt the hard shell around her heart crack a little more. One day, as she helped Malik with his homework, he looked up at her with a serious expression. "Ms. Adams, do you think I could be a teacher someday, like you?" Ms. Adams felt a lump form in her throat. She thought of how she had once believed children like Malik couldn't achieve such goals. Now, looking into his determined eyes, she saw nothing but possibility. "Malik," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I think you can be anything you set your mind to. You'd make an amazing teacher." As she spoke those words, Ms. Adams realized how much she had changed. The prejudices and frustrations that had once clouded her judgment were fading away, replaced by a deep respect for the strength and courage these children showed every day. That night, as Ms. Adams drove home, she found herself thinking about Marky. She remembered the hurt in his eyes, the way he had tried so hard despite her harsh words. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she finally understood the depth of her mistakes and the incredible resilience Marky had shown in the face of her cruelty. As Ms. Adams drove to school that morning, her heart raced with a mix of nervousness and determination. The past few weeks at the Disability Center had changed her in ways she never thought possible. She parked her car and sat for a moment, taking a deep breath before stepping out. Walking into her classroom, she saw her students with new eyes. Each face held a story, a struggle, a dream. Her gaze lingered on Marky, who was quietly arranging his books on his desk. The sight of him made her heart ache with regret. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice softer than usual. The students looked up, surprised by the change in her tone. Ms. Adams took another deep breath. "Before we start today's lesson, I have something important to say." She paused, gathering her courage. "I owe all of you an apology, especially you, Marky." The room fell silent. Marky's eyes widened, and he gripped the arms of his wheelchair tightly. "I've been unfair and unkind," Ms. Adams continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I let my frustrations cloud my judgment, and I forgot the most important part of being a teacher, to nurture and support each and every one of you." She walked over to Marky's desk and knelt beside him. "Marky, I'm truly sorry for the way I've treated you. Your disability doesn't define you, and I was wrong to make you feel like it did. You've shown incredible strength and resilience, and I admire that deeply." Tears welled up in Marky's eyes, and he nodded silently, unable to speak. Ms. Adams stood up and addressed the entire class. "From now on, things are going to be different. I want this classroom to be a place where everyone feels valued and supported. We're going to learn from each other and celebrate our differences." The students exchanged glances, some looking confused, others hopeful. Amy, Marky's friend, smiled encouragingly at him. "I know it might take time for you to trust me again," Ms. Adams said, "but I promise to do better. I've learned so much in the past few weeks, and I want to share that with all of you. We're going to make this classroom a place where everyone can thrive." As she spoke, Ms. Adams felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was committed to becoming the teacher her students deserved. The harsh, impatient woman she had been was fading away, replaced by someone who understood the power of compassion and inclusivity. Ms. Adams took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the classroom. The silence was palpable, every student hanging on her words. She knew this moment was crucial, not just for Marky, but for all of them. "I want you all to understand," she continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "that my behavior was unacceptable. I've been harsh, impatient, and at times, cruel. Each of you deserves better than that." She walked slowly between the desks, making eye contact with each student. When she reached Marky, she paused, her hand resting gently on his desk. "Marky, I treated you unfairly because of your disability. I saw it as an inconvenience rather than understanding the challenges you face every day. I was wrong, so very wrong." Marky looked up at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Ms. Adams felt her own eyes welling up, but she pressed on. "To all of you, I promise to do better. I will be the teacher you deserve, patient, understanding, and supportive. I will celebrate your strengths and help you overcome your challenges. No student in this class will ever feel left out or less than again." She returned to the front of the classroom, facing her students with a new sense of purpose. "I know it will take time to rebuild your trust. I'm prepared for that. From today, we're going to create a classroom environment where everyone feels valued and respected. We'll learn together, grow together, and support each other." Ms. Adams paused, looking at each face in turn. Some students nodded slightly, while others remained cautious, unsure of this sudden change. "I want you to know that it's okay to make mistakes. I made a big one, and I'm learning from it. That's what I want for all of you too, to learn, to grow, and to become the best versions of yourselves." She walked over to Marky once more, kneeling beside his wheelchair to meet his eyes. "Marky, your strength and resilience have taught me so much. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Thank you for your patience with me." Marky nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Ms. Adams stood up, addressing the class once more. "From now on, we're a team. We'll face challenges together, celebrate victories together, and most importantly, we'll respect and support each other. I promise to lead by example and to be the teacher you all deserve." As Ms. Adams finished speaking, a hush fell over the classroom. All eyes turned to Marky, waiting to see how he would respond. For a moment, the young boy sat quietly, his hands fidgeting in his lap. Then, with a deep breath, he looked up at Ms. Adams, his eyes shining with a wisdom beyond his years. "Miss Adams," Marky said, his voice soft but clear, "I forgive you." The simplicity and sincerity of his words seemed to echo through the room. Ms. Adams felt her breath catch in her throat, overwhelmed by the young boy's grace. Marky continued, his voice growing stronger. "I know it's not always easy to understand what it's like for me, but I'm just trying my best, like everyone else. Thank you for saying sorry and for wanting to do better." As he spoke, his classmates listened intently, many of them nodding in agreement. Amy, Marky's friend, reached over and squeezed his hand, a proud smile on her face. Ms. Adams knelt down beside Marky's desk, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you, Marky. Your forgiveness means more to me than you could ever know." The atmosphere in the classroom began to shift. The tension that had hung in the air for so long seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of hope and new beginnings. Students who had been silent observers now began to speak up. "I think it's really brave of you both," said Michael from the back of the class. "It's not easy to say sorry or to forgive." Sarah, another student, chimed in. "Yeah, and it makes me want to be kinder too. We should all look out for each other more." As the students shared their thoughts, Miss Adams stood up, looking around the room with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. She saw smiles where there had once been frowns, open faces where there had been closed-off expressions. "Thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Marky's forgiveness is a gift, and I promise to honor it every day. Let's all learn from his example and treat each other with more kindness and understanding." The students nodded in agreement, many of them stealing glances at Marky with newfound respect. As for Marky, he sat a little straighter in his wheelchair, a quiet pride evident in his posture. Ms. Adams felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would not be easy, but with Marky's forgiveness and the class's willingness to move forward, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She looked at her students, no longer seeing obstacles or burdens but young minds full of potential, each deserving of her best efforts. Next day, Ms. Adams nervously smoothed her skirt as she waited outside Grace Valera's office. Her heart raced, but this time it wasn't from fear or defensiveness. It was from a genuine desire to share her transformative experience and make amends. When Grace opened the door, her warm smile immediately put Ms. Adams at ease. "Please come in," Grace said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. As they settled in, Ms. Adams took a deep breath. "Mrs. Valera, I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to volunteer at the Disability Center. It's been life-changing." Grace nodded encouragingly, her eyes kind. "I'm glad to hear that. Please, tell me about your experience." Ms. Adams' words tumbled out, filled with emotion. She spoke of Malik and the other children she'd met, their determination and joy in the face of challenges. She described how her perspective had shifted, how she'd come to see the strength in what she once viewed as weakness. "I was so wrong," Ms. Adams admitted, her voice cracking. "About Marky, about all of it. I can't thank you enough for not giving up on me, for showing me a better way." Grace listened intently, her expression softening with each word. When Ms. Adams finished, Grace reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for being open to change. It takes great courage to confront our own biases." Ms. Adams nodded, wiping away a tear. "I want to do better, to be better, for Marky and for all my students." A spark of inspiration lit up Grace's eyes. "You know, Ms. Adams, I think we have an opportunity here. What if we worked together to create programs at the school that promote inclusion and support for disabled students?" Ms. Adams sat up straighter, her face brightening. "That would be wonderful. I'd be honored to help in any way I can." Grace smiled broadly. "I believe your experience, combined with my advocacy work, could make a real difference. We could start with awareness workshops for teachers and students, maybe even create a buddy system to foster understanding and friendship." As they began to brainstorm ideas, Ms. Adams felt a surge of hope and purpose. She realized that this wasn't just about making amends, it was about creating lasting change that would benefit countless students in the future. With Grace's help and Ms. Adams's newfound passion, the school administration embraced the idea of creating new initiatives to support students with disabilities. Principal Wilson called a meeting with the school board, where Grace and Ms. Adams presented their proposal for a more inclusive educational environment. "We have a unique opportunity," Grace explained to the board members, her voice filled with conviction, "to create a school where every student feels valued, regardless of their abilities." Ms. Adams nodded in agreement, adding, "As a teacher, I've seen firsthand how important it is to address these issues. We can make a real difference in these children's lives." The board members listened intently, impressed by the passion and dedication of both women. After a brief discussion, they unanimously approved the proposal, allocating funds for new programs and resources. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Adams worked tirelessly alongside Grace to develop these initiatives. They created a comprehensive plan that included awareness workshops for teachers, sensitivity training for students, and a buddy system pairing disabled and non-disabled students. Ms. Adams took charge of organizing the teacher workshops, drawing from her recent experiences at the Disability Center. She invited guest speakers, including parents of children with disabilities and disability rights advocates, to share their perspectives with the staff. "Remember," Ms. Adams told her colleagues during one session, "every child has potential. It's our job to nurture that potential, no matter what challenges they face." Grace, meanwhile, focused on developing the student buddy system. She worked with the school counselor to carefully match students, ensuring that each pairing would be beneficial for both parties. As the initiatives began to take shape, the changes in the school's culture became noticeable. Teachers who had once been hesitant to work with disabled students now approached their roles with renewed enthusiasm and understanding. In the hallways, students could be seen helping their disabled peers, whether it was carrying books or simply offering a friendly smile. The atmosphere of the school shifted, becoming more compassionate and inclusive. Marky, in particular, flourished under the new programs. His buddy, a kind-hearted boy named Jake, became a close friend, and together they navigated the school day with ease. Ms. Adams watched with pride as Marky's confidence grew, and he began to participate more actively in class discussions. One afternoon, as Ms. Adams observed a group of students working together on a project, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Grace, smiling warmly. "Look at them," Grace said, gesturing to the diverse group of children. "This is what we hoped for." Ms. Adams nodded, her eyes misting over with emotion. "It's more than I ever imagined possible," she replied softly. Ms. Adams stood at the front of the staff room, her hands trembling slightly as she faced her colleagues. The room was packed with teachers, all curious about the sudden meeting called by Principal Wilson. Ms. Adams took a deep breath, steadying herself before she began to speak. "I want to share something important with all of you," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "It's about my journey, and how I've changed as a teacher." The room fell silent as Ms. Adams recounted her experience with Marky, the incident that led to her volunteering at the Disability Center, and the profound impact it had on her. She spoke with raw honesty, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I let my frustrations cloud my judgment, and I failed to see the potential in every child. But my time at the center opened my eyes." As she described her interactions with the children at the center, particularly young Malik, her colleagues listened intently. Many of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing bits of themselves in Ms. Adams's past behavior. "These children taught me more than I could ever teach them," Ms. Adams continued, her voice growing stronger. "They showed me the true meaning of resilience, determination, and joy. And it made me realize that we as educators have a responsibility to nurture every student's potential, regardless of their abilities or challenges." Ms. Adams then shared some of the inclusive teaching practices she had learned and implemented in her classroom. She explained how simple adjustments could make a world of difference for students with disabilities. "It's not about lowering our standards," she emphasized. "It's about finding creative ways to help every student reach their full potential." As she spoke, Ms. Adams could see the impact her words were having on her fellow teachers. Some nodded in agreement while others wiped away tears. Even the most skeptical among them seemed to be reconsidering their views. "I stand before you today not just as your colleague, but as someone who has seen the light," Ms. Adams concluded. "I'm asking you to join me in making our school a place where every child feels valued and supported. Together, we can create an environment where all students can thrive." The room erupted in applause as Ms. Adams finished speaking. Several teachers approached her afterward, eager to learn more about her experiences and the inclusive practices she had mentioned. In the weeks that followed Ms. Adams' transformation, the atmosphere in her classroom changed dramatically. Marky, who had once shrunk in his seat to avoid attention, now sat up straight, his eyes bright with newfound confidence. Ms. Adams approached Marky's desk one morning, a warm smile on her face. "How are you doing today, Marky?" she asked gently. "I'm great, Ms. Adams," Marky replied, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "I finished that book you recommended. It was amazing." Ms. Adams beamed with pride. "That's wonderful. Would you like to share your thoughts with the class later?" Marky nodded eagerly, no longer afraid to speak up in front of his peers. As the days passed, Marky's academic performance began to soar. With the new support programs in place and Ms. Adams's patient guidance, he found himself tackling challenges he once thought impossible. His test scores improved and he started raising his hand more often to answer questions. During group projects, Marky's classmates no longer hesitated to include him. Instead, they sought out his ideas and contributions. Amy, his longtime friend, noticed the change in Marky. "You're really on fire lately," she said to him one day during lunch. "It's like you're a whole new person." Marky smiled shyly. "I just feel, I don't know, more like I belong now, like I can do anything if I try hard enough." The other students at the table nodded in agreement. They had all noticed the positive changes in their classroom and in Marky. Ms. Adams watched from across the cafeteria, her heart swelling with emotion. She saw Marky laughing with his friends, fully engaged in conversation. It was a far cry from the isolated boy she had once unfairly labeled as a burden. In class, Marky's hand shot up during a particularly challenging math problem. Ms. Adams called on him, and he wheeled himself to the front of the room. "I think I know how to solve this," he said, his voice steady and confident. As Marky explained his solution, Ms. Adams felt a lump form in her throat. She remembered a time when she would have dismissed his attempt, assuming he couldn't keep up. Now, she listened intently, nodding encouragingly as he worked through the problem. When Marky finished, the class erupted in applause. His solution was spot on, and even some of the top students looked impressed. "Excellent work, Marky," Ms. Adams exclaimed. "You've really grasped this concept. Would you mind helping some of your classmates who might be struggling?" Marky's face lit up. "I'd love to, Ms. Adams." As Marky moved around the room offering assistance to his peers, Ms. Adams felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. She watched as students who once avoided Marky now eagerly sought his help, treating him with respect and admiration. The classroom had become a supportive and positive environment, where every student felt valued and capable. Marky's growth and success had become a powerful symbol of what could be achieved through empathy, understanding, and the right support. As the school year drew to a close, Ms. Adams found herself sitting at her desk, surrounded by the colorful artwork and projects her students had created. She gazed around the classroom, her eyes lingering on Marky's empty desk. A wave of emotion washed over her as she reflected on the incredible journey of the past few months. Ms. Adams closed her eyes, remembering the harsh words she had once spoken to Marky. The memory stung, but it also served as a powerful reminder of how far she had come. Her time at the Disability Center had opened her eyes to a world she had never truly understood before. She thought of Malik, the young boy who had taught her so much about resilience and determination. Grace Valera's face came to mind, and Ms. Adams felt a surge of gratitude. Grace's compassion and willingness to give her a second chance had been the catalyst for her transformation. Instead of demanding punishment, Grace had offered an opportunity for growth and redemption. It was a lesson in forgiveness that Ms. Adams would carry with her always. As she looked around the classroom once more, Ms. Adams realized that it was no longer just a room where she taught lessons. It had become a place of inclusion, support, and understanding. The new programs implemented with Grace's help had changed the entire school culture. Students with disabilities were no longer seen as burdens or obstacles, but as valued members of the community with unique perspectives to offer. Ms. Adams thought about Marky's progress throughout the year. She remembered the shy, withdrawn boy he had once been, and marveled at the confident, enthusiastic student he had become. His success was a testament to what could be achieved when educators approached their students with empathy and patience. A sense of deep fulfillment settled over Ms. Adams. She realized that her journey had not only made her a better teacher, but a better person as well. The compassion she had learned to extend to her students had seeped into every aspect of her life, making her more understanding and patient in all her interactions. As she packed up her belongings for the summer, Ms. Adams felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was committed to continuing her work as an advocate for inclusivity and compassion in education. She vowed to herself that no student under her care would ever feel the way Marky once had, isolated, humiliated, or undervalued. Ms. Adams knew that her journey was far from over. There would always be more to learn, more ways to improve, and more students who needed her support. But she was ready for the challenge, armed with the lessons she had learned and the transformative power of empathy. As the new initiatives took root within the school's culture, it became clear that changes were needed on the physical grounds as well. The school board, inspired by the success of the inclusion programs, allocated additional funds for renovations to make the campus more accessible for students with disabilities like Marky. Construction crews arrived during the summer break, and the school grounds bustled with activity. The first order of business was installing ramps alongside staircases, ensuring that wheelchair users could easily access all areas of the school. Smooth, gently sloping paths replaced uneven walkways, making it safer and more comfortable for students with mobility issues to navigate the campus. Inside the buildings, workers widened doorways and installed automatic door openers. These seemingly small changes made a world of difference for students like Marky, who could now enter classrooms independently without struggling with heavy doors. The bathrooms underwent significant renovations too. Spacious, wheelchair-accessible stalls were added, complete with grab bars and lowered sinks. For students with visual impairments, braille signage was installed throughout the school. In the classrooms, adjustable height desks were brought in, allowing students in wheelchairs to sit comfortably alongside their peers. The science lab saw the addition of lowered workstations, ensuring that all students could participate fully in experiments and hands-on learning activities. The school library wasn't forgotten either. Wide aisles between bookshelves made it easy for wheelchair users to browse, while a selection of audiobooks and large print books was added for students with visual impairments. Perhaps the most exciting change for many students was the renovation of the playground. New equipment was installed that could be enjoyed by children of all abilities. There were wheelchair-accessible swings, sensory play areas for students with autism, and ground-level play structures that didn't require climbing. When the students returned for the new school year, they were amazed by the transformation. Marky's face lit up as he easily maneuvered his wheelchair up the new ramps and through the wide hallways. For the first time, he felt truly independent at school. "This is awesome," Marky exclaimed to his friend Jake as they explored the renovated campus together. "I can go anywhere I want now, just like everyone else." Ms. Adams watched with a warm smile as Marky and his classmates enjoyed the new facilities. She felt a sense of pride, knowing that she had played a part in making these changes happen. The physical renovations, combined with the new inclusive programs, had truly transformed the school into a welcoming place for all students. If you enjoyed the story of Ms. Adams and Marky, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.